Welcome to the Dreamboat. Remember, you can join the DRI for just £30 a year. You get access to more content, including videos and discounts for our events. It's a great way of finding out more about our work, joining our dream community, and supporting this podcast. Details in the show notes and at driccpe.org.uk/membership. Welcome to the Dreamboat podcast, a place where we talk about everything dreamy, all you wanted to know about dreams and where you might find some answers. My name is Dave Billington, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also director of the Dream Research Institute. And I'm joined by fellow psychotherapist Laura Payne.
Hello, I'm Laura Payne, and I'm also part of the Dream Research Institute. And we're called the Dreamboat because we are actually recording our podcast on a beautiful canal barge here at Little Venice in London called the Boat Pod.
We'll be looking at dreams, talking to guest experts, and answering your questions.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
Today, we're going to talk about dream incubation. It's an ancient technique which is based on the notion that we can prepare ourselves to dream with the intent to manifest something such as healing. And if you listen to our episode on the history of dreams, you'll know that this concept of dream manifestation can be found in most ancient cultures. It takes some different forms, but basically people might go into nature or to a spiritual or religious place with the intention of asking for guidance in a dream. They would sleep in that place and then ask a dream guide to help them interpret their dreams for them. And I'm thinking about some of the shamanistic traditions where you have the spirit quest and the dream quest. So most of us know Joseph interpreting the Egyptian pharaoh's dreams, and we talked about that in a previous episode. Less is known about the Greek counterpart, who is Asclepios. So our guest today is my co-host, Laura Payne, who has been looking at the subject of Asclepios and dream incubation as part of her own research.
Hello.
So, hello. It seems strange to say this to you, but welcome aboard the Dreamboat, your Dreamboat.
It feels really weird being a guest rather than being a co-host. And it's interesting how one's nerves change slightly when you're in the guest position. But there we go. I'm looking forward to talking about this amazing and fascinating subject.
Yeah, well, there's so much. And you and I have talked about it over the years. You've shared some of what you've been looking at and some of the things you've been working on. And I'm aware that you've run a workshop at one of the conferences of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. And so you've been experimenting with some of this. But I wanted to start off, first of all, by asking you, who's Asclepios?
It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, for 2,000 years, he was the man or the god, and that's a sort of subject of debate. Yes, Asclepios, whether he was a follow-on from Imhotep, who was the ancient Egyptian equivalent, who had a healing sanctuary and was using dream incubation for healing in the ancient Egyptian world. It was believed to be at Saqqara. And a lot of, currently there's some interesting digs happening out in Egypt looking at this. But within the ancient world, the god or the god of healing, the god of medicine was Asclepios. And there were sanctuaries to him, which are known as Asclepions or Asclepia, dotted around the Mediterranean. There are probably about 300, and they were all what we would call hospitals today. They were prototype hospitals. Famous ancient doctors came out of these Asclepions, like Hippocrates and Galen. And Asclepios himself was deemed to be the son of Apollo, and Apollo had a relationship, and very complicated in all ancient Greek matters, with a princess, a mortal princess called Coronis, and she was unfaithful to him. And so his Apollo's twin sister Artemis, who's the equivalent of Diana in the Latin Roman canon of gods, Artemis decided she was going to kill Coronis for being unfaithful to her twin brother. And as she was about to kill Coronis, Cronus said that she was pregnant, and Apollo stepped in, and he couldn't save Coronis, but he could save the unborn child, therefore making the child born, and that was Asclepios. And Asclepios, there are a lot of very similar myths, and there are a lot of different takes on this actual story. But basically, Apollo seized the child out of the womb, and he was then looked after by Chiron, who was the centaur. And we mentioned the centaur before in the last series as being an interesting image used in the work of modern day psychoanalyst Ken and philosopher Ken Wilber. And
Chiron, from what I vaguely remember about Greek mythology, he's a mythic figure of healing, of medicine. He's sort of a proto-medical scientist, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Half man, half horse,
yeah.
basically. And so Asclepius was also, as part of this upbringing, was looked after by a dog, which becomes an important part of the Asclepius or the Asclepian imagery, because that is one of the if a dog appears in your dream, it's one of the key signs of healing, and we can get onto that obviously, as is the snake. So part of the Asclepius myth is that he was looked after by this dog, and he was also looked after by snakes, which also become a very important part of the Asclepius or the Asclepian imagery, as we know from the actual staff of medicine. Part of the Hippocratic Oath is the snake twined round the healing rod. And so this has come out of the story of Asclepius. So basically, Asclepius was taught by Chiron, the centaur, all of his medical knowledge. He one day watched a snake revive a dead snake with herbs that it had in its mouth. And Asclepios basically took the technique, used the herbs, and started reviving people who had died, much to the disgust and the anger of the gods. So in the end, Zeus decided that this mortal, half Apollo son, god, needed to be got rid of, basically. So Zeus destroyed him. And so Asclepios then basically then went on and became put as a sort of god himself, and deemed the god of medicine because of his healing abilities. And as a result, these temples to Asclepios grew very rapidly around the Mediterranean.
And I understand that you can still see them now, or there's remnants of them in various places.
Yeah, if you go to Epidaurus in Greece, that was one of the main ones, I think part of the Parthenon in Athens. I've been to Epidaurus, and I've also been to the one in Sardinia, which is actually... You can't walk over it in the same way as you can in the one in Epidaurus. And then there's another sort of very big one that almost vied with Epidaurus for being the main centre within the Mediterranean, which was at Pergamon, which is in Turkey, on the Izmir, in the Izmir province, so on the edge of the ocean there. And people around from the ancient world would come from far and wide to these temples to be healed. They were, as I said, often seen as prototype hospitals, but they were more than that. They were a bit like modern day spas and entertainment centres, like sort of going to a spa and having a view cinema complex or something there at the same time. So if you look at the one at Epidaurus, people would go. They would check in and be given a sort of spiritual health plan of some kind. They'd meet their guides. They'd meet what were known as psychotherapeutes. And the psychotherapeutes, which is where we get the word psychotherapist from, were the dream guides. And the theory is that you would go to one of these sleep temples to dream your healing. And there were 5 key figures that they were looking for in the dream, which would be giving you a message. One was Asclepius himself, the god. Second was Telesphorus, which was seen as Asclepius' son, but he often appears as like a dwarf figure, often wearing almost like a monk's cowl. But the sign of a boy or a teenage boy in a dream was also seen as a parallel to that too.
Okay, so he might be a dwarf or a child or an adolescent.
Exactly.
Some form of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the hooded figure in particular was one that they were particularly interested in seeing. And then there were the 3 main animals or creatures, a cockerel, because people would come and at the start of their healing process would sacrifice a cockerel to the god, and often at the end of the process would also sacrifice a cockerel too. So to see the cockerel in a dream was seen as being a good sign, a good healing sign. The dog, because of the dog that looked after Asclepius, and the famous Asclepion snakes. Now, these snakes weren't mythical. They were real. They're often known as a rat snake. They're non-venomous. You find them in the Mediterranean, and they can be absolutely ginormous. We're
really?
talking about 6.5 feet of snake. And in the temples, they would have these snakes roaming freely. So when you'd come in...
We're talking about dreams or nightmares now. It sounds quite frightening.
Exactly. If you don't like snakes, it's a big thing to work with.
Yeah.
But they are non-venomous. And so they would live in these pits. I think I was quite fascinated to know that they were rat snakes, because they would eat like rats and mice. And they probably kept, a bit like the temple cat, but they probably kept the temples clear of vermin in different ways. And it was quite a complicated process. You'd turn up, you'd basically check in your problems, your ailments, and you would be set a program. So you would be given music to listen to. There was, for instance, at Epidaurus, there is this massive, very famous amphitheatre. So you would go to be entertained there. There would be drama, there would be music, there would be poetry. One of the most amazing things about Epidaurus is that it is acoustically brilliant. And the theory is you could play a lyre there and you could hear it right at the very top. And we're talking of about, I can't remember how many stories now, but it's like at least 30, 40 banks of seats. Actually, I think it's more than that.
Wow. And
it's a massive amphitheatre. And somebody can go down onto the stage area and clap their hands or whisper, and you can hear it. A lot of people go just to play with the technique. And archaeologists have found that part of the technique of this amazing auditory experience comes from a labyrinth that's been built underneath, which helps amplify the sound.
Wow.
It's quite an experience to go there, actually, and test it out.
And quite a feat of engineering behind all of this as well.
Exactly. And it also underscores why these places were such an important part of the ancient world. But all of this is just to lead up to the dream incubation. So you would be entertained during the day. It's about, as we've talked about before, it's about the power of the creative imagination. So people would be sort of tantalized in many ways with listening and watching varying plays and music. And then in the evening, they would check back in with the psychotherapists, and they would prepare to dream. And they would dream either, it depended on the size from what I can make out of the Asclepion, but they would either dream in dormitories, but originally they dreamed in caves, which were known as Abatons. And so when I've been playing with this as a for people who want to come on dream retreats. I tell people you're going to bring or make your own Abaton. I use a very nice blue pop-up tent, one of these single tents. And
Didn't have a cave nearby? No?
Exactly. But it's amazing how quickly, once you really get used to your Abaton and you can decorate it and do varying things with it, how it becomes a very small enclosed sanctuary, a bit like a womb.
I was going to say, it sounds like the metaphorical return to the womb, rebirthing experience of some kind.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, remember that Asclepios was seized from the womb. So it feels like a sort of putting back in some way. And very powerful once you've designed your own Abaton. And so you would go, you would dream. The idea is that you would dream regularly. Each day you would come out, you would tell your dream to your therapist, a bit like, the waking dream technique.
Yeah.
They'd run through the dream with you. And if you didn't have one of the 5 sort of key images that would signpost your healing, you'd go back into the spa experience again, and you would bathe, and you would go to the auditorium to listen to nice music and see nice plays, and each night you would go back into the same process.
Okay. So from what we know of the ancient world and remaining records that we have, what kinds of ailments were people bringing to these temples? Was it mental ailments? Was it physical, internal, external? What sorts of things were they looking to have healed?
I get a feeling from some of the material I've read that it would probably be your average A&E department. So
okay.
People would turn up with anything and everything. Some of it sounds as if it was a psychological problem. Some of it could be an actual skin disease of some kind. There's a particular story of, I think, with Hippocrates, where somebody checked in with a spear in their side. And the theory, one of the thoughts is that not only were they entertained, but they were also drugged. And so hallucinogenic drugs were offered, probably opium of some kind. And they would lie in the Abaton, and probably someone who was a practicing surgeon like Hippocrates would be removing the spear from the side.
I guess the opium would help you help take your mind off of it, just put it that way.
Natural anesthetic.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, anesthesia. So that's also really quite an interesting. That's why people often now have seen these as prototype hospitals. And as I said, some of the sort of known healers of the time have come out of working in these particular temples. At Epidaurus itself, there are about, I think there are about 300 stelae, which are these large stones. They're large marble boards, which date from, I think, 450 BC. And they're known as Iamatas, and they have names of people and their case studies and the complaints that they've checked in and the cures that were found for them on these marble slabs at Epidaurus. So it's almost like patients have obviously sacrificed quite a few cockerels and have had their names put in stone as gratitude for the healing from the god.
But also then there's the learning from that we know what the ailment is, we know what's been prescribed, so to speak, whatever that might be. And assuming that someone's around to give a donation and have this inscribed, I guess it means that they are grateful. They were healed.
Yeah.
And then this becomes sort of like the patient records that are available to the next generations and even us now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who, like myself, have gone away and done quite a lot of research on this and played with developing it as a technique themselves. Jean Houston, who sort of quite famously set up her own sort of school around this, because it all sat within what was known as the ancient mystery schools. Mm-hmm. And so she's done over the years quite a lot of work on this. Edward Tick being someone else who's written quite extensively, and I think also ran tours to some of the key sites and encourage people to dream and feed back their dreams. I would love to take a group to Epidaurus and try it out for real. Perhaps not with the snakes, but you can see the snake pits there. Actually, it's quite fascinating. But when I have played with it, in terms of running weekends or, as you say, workshops around this, some of the dreams that have come back, it's just actually quite remarkable. So I've got a couple of examples here. So I had on one weekend a woman called Imogen who saw herself in a womb. Mm-hmm. So actually saw herself in an Abaton as pure light. And she found she was stroking her mother's womb lining, and her own hands and feet were glowing light. And she had brought with her, so I encourage people before the weekend to find a Greek myth that speaks to them. And speaks possibly to where they are in their lives currently. And she had brought the myth of Oedipus, and which was basically Oedipus killed his father to be with his mother, and so it's and we often call it the Oedipal myth as such. It's obviously one of Freud's stages in Freud would say in development. Anyway, this particular dreamer had never really understood why her own father had rejected her, and she learned during the dream that night that he feared the outcome if he got close to her, as she looked so much like his own mother. And he had to control his rising feelings by rejecting her. And she, at the end of the weekend, she said it had bugged her all of her life that her father had rejected her, not other members of the family, but had in particular rejected her. And as she said, I got a very clear piece of understanding from this that had given her great peace. Wow. So, I mean, it's just really quite fascinating. And then on another workshop, somebody called Rachel, she had come to the workshop feeling, as she checked in, damp and cold all weekend. And she said she hadn't really been eating well, and she felt out of rhythm with her life one way or another. And she, in her own Abaton that we had built, so I encourage people to bring their Abaton with them, a tent ideally, or we can make one. And that's also good fun. And everybody designs their own temple and brings their own material to honour the god, Asclepios. And so she, in her dream, was met by what felt like a spiritual guide, an old man with a beard, who we realised afterwards was the god himself, Asclepios. Now, in the ancient times, that's like, wow, you actually got the god. Anyway, she had this old man turn up with a beard in the dream, and it was on the edge of a marketplace abroad. And as she described it, it felt very much like a typical Greek village of some kind. Mm-hmm. And she apparently this figure told Rachel that she needed to have more fire and sun in her system, and she needed to eat only foods that would increase her heat: red, yellow, orange, so carrots, peppers, tomatoes. And with this figure in the dream, they toured the stalls in the marketplace as he showed her what she should eat. And he said, eat no white foods, eat more cooked foods and cooked food. And she actually took this away and played with it and did it, and felt, she said it changed her completely. She almost needed an external force to tell her that her diet was rubbish. And this would suit her stature better than what she was eating already. Now, for the ancients, that would be just a typical cure dream, to have the god turn up like that. So, I mean, it was remarkable that came out of just, us experimenting, for want of a better description, with the notion of dream incubation. But there's something in it.
So it sounds like, if I've understood, when you're doing these experiments with this process now, you have the Abaton, as you said. You have something that allows the dreamer to go into their womb-like experience, to have their dream. You said that you're asking them to bring things with them to honor the gods, so a version of the sacrifice.
Yes.
What sort of things would those be?
I've had people bring pine cones. Often people tend to bring things from nature, occasionally photographs of people who have died, or people, children, people who are special to them, precious stones, semi-precious stones. People tend to bring things from nature. We've had a lot of people bring shells to put on their temple, but it's what makes sense for you. Some people have come, they haven't really been looking for any particular healing. There's nothing that's wrong, but they've come to play with and experiment with it. When we did it at the IASD, it was really interesting because the group, we met each morning. So just after we dreamt, we met each morning before the conference started, and people would check in their dreams and we would draw them. So we would draw the dream, but people brought something each day to put on the temple that we had built to Asclepios in the room. And each night I would encourage them to go back and see the room that they were staying in. We were actually staying in a monastery, so they felt a bit like cells, so a bit like an Abaton. And so we would... they would go back, and I had developed a meditation so that they got into the Asclepios dreaming process. And then, as I said, in the morning, come check the dreams into the group. And over the 5 days, some of the 5 main images did come through. We had pictures so you could see them all. And so, perhaps it's the notion of autosuggestion, a form of hypnosis, whatever it is, but it's that power of the creative imagination.
And setting an intention of some kind.
Yes.
And it's something, we're often very sort of passive with our dreams. They're just something that happens spontaneously every night. But what I find really fascinating about this is what happens when you go to sleep with a very clear intention about what you're asking for, what you're hoping for. Doesn't usually come out exactly as you think, but something comes up, and that can be really meaningful, at least, but can be healing as well. And you don't have to just wait for something to happen. You can ask for it.
Yeah. It's very similar to the notion of lucid dreaming, where you can perhaps go in and think, I'm going to dream lucidly tonight, and I'm going to control my dreams. I'm going to fly or whatever. It's a very similar idea. 9 times out of 10, under dream incubation, this type of dream incubation, you are not lucid. The dreamer is not normally lucid. But as you say, it's still the notion of setting an intent before you sleep, the intention being healing.
Yeah, and then having ritual to support that intention. So it's really getting it into your consciousness before you sleep. There's something very structured about it in that way. And actually, one thing we didn't talk about so much, but part of that structure, you said in the ancient world, it was about going into the theater and experiencing the poetry and the music and the performances. You use myths, and you ask people to bring their myth or to choose a myth that is particularly meaningful to them. Is that the equivalent? Because that's what people would have seen on the stage, isn't it? Is the myth being acted out in Greek theatre? Exactly.
It's by contacting. I mean, for the Indians, they would say these stories hold the archetype. They're very deep. A lot of the Greek myths and other myths hold very deep energies that sort of have almost transcended time and space and history. They hold a very deep sense of energy, which when you tap into them, as Imogen explained, she didn't know the myth of Oedipus at all before, but something unlocked something within her that helped her understand more about her father.
Yeah, that's remarkable. So, are there other experiences that you'd like to share from what people have experienced in your retreats?
Well, one of the my own night in the Abaton I found actually really fascinating. I did one on the night of the blood red wolf moon, so it was a full moon, and I got up at about 5 o'clock in the morning to see it, and the sky was really clear, and my dream just before I set the alarm, the 5 o'clock alarm, was a mathematical grid system of what felt like 3 stars, which were like 2 stars joined to 1 star, making 6 stars. Then there were 4 stars to 3 stars, and on it went till it made these 10 stars, and I was fascinated by it. I really love recurring patterns and images and synchronicities. And the image really sat with me, and I thought, well, I'll go online and I'll just see if I can find this particular image. And I realized that it's a grid, which was an ancient Greek mystical symbol. I'd never seen it in my life before, called a tetractys. And it's also an early Kabbalah symbol, an image. And the Pythagorean cult was really interested in this image. It was a form of divination, and has sort of followed through in alchemy and also in poetry. And so I found it as a sort of method for divination really quite interesting. So I've been playing with that, using things like tarot cards and whatnot, just to see how it sort of plays out. So that came out of a particular dream in my Abaton. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think whether that image was implanted in me or I have seen it while reading around. I don't think I'd ever seen it before. So I became really sort of fascinated with it, and seeing it played out in front of me like that.
Yeah,
was interesting.
You're going to be having some retreats based on continued experimentation with this method. And I imagine that when you do, we'll have them up on the DRI website. And you have a Facebook group for people who are interested in this as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a called Dreaming Rituals, but also Asclepion Dreamers is a group as part of Dreaming Rituals. It's sort of in its infancy, but I'm looking for people to check in these type of dreams that have one of the 5 key images as such. So, the God himself, the sun, whether particularly the sort of the in its dwarf form, the cockerel, the snake, and the dog.
And maybe can you just say a little bit about what, if anything, each of those figures mean? Do they bring a different kind of message, or do they have a different meaning or significance when you see one or the other of them?
That's a really interesting question, actually, because obviously Asclepios it's quite clear. It's the god of healing. He's rocked up in your dream.
Yeah.
Telesphorus, interesting, complex. It is the sun. He might be a prototype older image, older than the from the ancient Greeks. There's a lot of discussion around it. Go and read online and see a lot more. It might have actually come out from a Celtic image. I became very interested in seeing. I think it was in Vienna. I was looking at some of the Klimt work in Vienna, and also they had some ancient Egyptian sarcophagi there, and I noticed on a couple of them they had dwarf figures, and I wondered whether it might have, so these cowed-like figures, these tiny cowed-like figures. So I wondered whether it's an image that's come from further afield back in time. Then the cockerel is obviously because you sacrificed the cockerel, so your sacrifice has been honoured in your dream if the cockerel turns up. The dog, fascinating image. I mean, it's again an ancient symbol. The dog is often seen as a psychopomp, so basically straddles the world of the dead and the world of the living. So bringing messages back from the other side of whatever you're going to call that sort of psychic, telepathic, sort of otherworldly space, which for the ancients would be perhaps represented, particularly for the Greeks, by Hades, which was the underworld. And then the snake, well, again, I mean, every culture, Adam and Eve, every culture has a image for good and for bad for the snake, for the Asclepion, and it's actually known in the Mediterranean world as rat snake or the Asclepion snake. And the snake, again, because it sheds its skin, is often seen as a symbol of regeneration, rebirth. So it's got a lot of transformation the snake represents in some way. And the notion of healing often and poison being together.
Yeah.
That there is this notion, in fact, the Greek word antidote, it is a Greek word, is this blend of healing and poison. And for a lot of people who might be listening to this who live somewhere in Europe, possibly, the image for a pharmacy is Hygeia. Hygeia's bowl. Now, Hygeia, which is where we get the word hygiene from, was Asclepius' daughter. And she often is pictured holding a bowl with a snake coming out over it or down the stem. And the bowl is meant to hold both the herbs, the life-giving or healing herbs, and the poison together. Okay. So the two things sit together, and that's often, this bowl is often seen as a symbol of a pharmacy.
Okay.
In several countries.
So that's different from the caduceus, the staff with the entwined snake.
Snakes, yeah. Now, if you're a doctor in the UK, for instance, the caduceus has two snakes, which I always find fascinating because it's like DNA, the two strands weaving themselves around the rod. The initial Asclepion image that the god holds is the staff, but with one snake around it, and again, the Asclepion snake. So it's such an ancient, rich symbol, the snake. It's something we both fear and love, but it often, in a lot of cultures, not just in the ancient Mediterranean cultures, it's often seen as a symbol of healing in some way.
Okay, so now it's time for our dream of the week, and we have a very relevant dream sent in this week from an anonymous contributor, and I'll just read it out, and Laura and I will discuss it. So the dreamer says, the dream was, I need to ask a favor from a woman who is not interested. So I remark on a photograph of her with a snake, trying to soften her. The snake comes out of the photograph. It is white and not very big, and it goes around my finger towards the tip of it, and I wonder if I should have asked if it is a venomous snake, as it is close to biting me. I'm not afraid, just annoyed that yet again I rushed without thinking. And the dreamer gives a little context for this. She says it was the beginning of the year in a time of change and uncertainty.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I think if she had arrived at Epidaurus and presented this dream to a psychotherapist there, they would probably want to know about her health, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your physical health. It can be your emotional health, your mental health at the time. And so this feels like a moment of anxiety, a lot happening as it's the start of the year. The snake, obviously, it's such a, as discussed, a major symbol for Asclepion healing.
It's a white snake as well. Which is quite unusual, I think.
It is, but it wraps itself around the finger. And when I was thinking about it, it almost felt like a bandage when I sort of tried to visualize what was happening for her. The fact it came out of a photograph of this woman. Obviously, the argument is that we're all people in our dreams. I wonder what of that woman that she's asking a favor for, what of herself she's asking for that she doesn't want to ask for. And the snake literally comes alive. It comes out of the photograph at her, which feels really powerful. Great sense of agency. I'm not sure whether she likes snakes or not and whether that freaked her out or not, but it made her reflect on her behaviour and possibly her behaviour around anxiety. And what was the last line she said again?
She said, I'm not afraid, just annoyed that yet again I rushed without thinking.
Yes, I think there's the clue. I think if for the psychotherapeutes, they would say that's the message of the dream.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you need to, with this busy start of the year, whenever she had this dream, be perhaps taking things more slowly and perhaps go on snake time, which is very slow.
Right.
Arguably. One of the things we often do as part of the weekend is we practice a form of breathing that I've called snake breathing, and to enable people to just to sort of slow down and enter more of the sort of the ritual in some way.
So where my mind goes with this, she isn't bitten in the dream, but I've encountered, many dreams of people being bitten by snakes, animals, dogs, whatever it is. And I think it's always worthwhile treating it as, here's something, it's bringing your attention to this part of your body. And quite often what we find is that there's been previous hints that there's something you need to pay attention to. And then finally the psyche actually bites you.
Exactly.
So she's not quite there yet. It's coiled around her finger. And I wonder which finger.
Yes, good point.
Because we have different purposes and there's sort of a different energy for our different fingers. And which hand, she doesn't actually say that either. So how do you relate to that in terms of the receptive side or the active side? And, is this the pointing finger? Is this the ring finger?
Yes.
It might be quite interesting to know which one it is. But, the snake is really bringing her attention to that place. And there's this sense in her that, well, maybe it's going to bite and maybe it's venomous and maybe I should have found out first. So, that just being that on the verge of something quite dangerous there, which I think, as you've said, is the message of the dream.
Yeah. I like that as an interpretation because again, the ancients had different meanings for the energies of what they saw, of the different energies for the fingers. So ring finger, little finger. I think for instance, the forefinger is the finger of Jupiter, for instance, and these all had different symbolisms attached to them. So that's a really, really good point. It'd be fun to ask her which hand and which finger the snake was there waiting for her. For a shaman to have a snake like that attached to you would be seen as something really powerful and important and beneficial.
Yeah. And then the final thing I'm just wondering about with it is she's asking a favor of a woman. She says she's trying to soften her. And what happens is actually something happens to her rather than to the other person. And it makes me wonder about, is this the pointing finger? That she needs to be softened. What needs to happen to the dreamer? Is that what your attention's being brought towards in that?
Nice. Love it. Thank you.
So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much to the dreamer for sharing that, and to all the people who send in their dreams. If you do want to share a dream and hear us talk about it, you can get in touch with us via the links that are in the show notes or on our website at driccpe.org.uk.
Well, it's been lovely being a guest. I'm better than I thought. But I will go back to being co-host now, I think. But thank you for the opportunity. It's such a great subject. As you can tell, I could probably rabbit on for ages about it. But it is fascinating, and the vestiges of it are still with us today.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk to you more about it. I'm sure it'll come up in other contexts. And hopefully we'll be able to tell people about the upcoming retreats, and you can find out about those on the website or via the Facebook pages. So thanks very much for being a guest, Laura.
Thank you.
Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.
So thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Don't forget to like us and leave comments on your favourite podcast platform. As I'm sure you know, that's the way we build an audience for the Dreamboat podcast, and also to spread news about dreaming. And as we said, there are many ways you can share your dreams at the DRI, the Dream Research Institute.
Yes, we have courses, events, and workshops, and we want to hear from you. So check out the show notes for links, or find us on Instagram and on our Facebook page and on our website at driccpe.org.uk. And if you want to explore your dreams further, or you would like to support us, you can join the DRI as a member for just £30 a year. As a member, you will get discounts for all of our events and short courses. You'll get our newsletter with latest dream research news, and we'll also be adding other special member benefits during the year. Of course, members' dreams will always be given preference for reading on the podcast Dream of the Week slot. So go to the link on the show notes and become a DRI member today. Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.